Welcome back to another episode of Desert Island Slabs, the hobby podcast where we delve deeper into the collector and the psyche of collecting. Every episode, I invite a new guest on to share with us an insight into their collection. I ask them to choose the 8 items in their collection that they would save above all others, that they would rescue if they were being marooned, if they were being stranded on a theoretical desert island. My guest this month is Austin Carlson, otherwise known as Carlson Cards. Austin is a mechanical engineer in the American auto industry, and you may well recognise him as the face of a very well-regarded YouTube channel, Carlson Cards. I'm honoured to have Austin on as a guest, as it's a bit of a departure from the sort of content we normally cover in Desert Island Slabs items. But the unifying theme is a collector who is so incredibly passionate about the hobby and his collection. So Austin, thank you so much for coming on Desert Island Slabs. It's an absolute honour to have you on. How are you doing?
Doing well. The intro's kind of funny. It reminds me of like a American game show like Jeopardy. Like we're coming on and you're introducing the genius who's going to win the game. No, I appreciate the kind words too.
Yeah, I've followed you for quite some time, and you know, obviously, like we're going to say, there's a huge American football focus within your collection, but so many of the themes that you touch upon in your content and your posts and your writing are things that that resonate with me, and the same concepts and very similar concepts. So to have you on is great, and I'm really looking forward to discussing your items and also obviously probably going off on some tangents and things. So how, obviously, I mean, you've seen a few of the episodes maybe, and how did you come to decide upon your 8 items?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because even the way you said in the intro, and I knew this is how it's supposed to be, like you save them going to an island, what would you save? I don't know if I actually did that here. I think what I did was the 8 that to me are the most representative of my collection, and it was, a hard decision. I think you could do it multiple ways. But I think it touches on, players I loved watching or didn't watch but loved learning about. And then the big thing for me that I enjoy about collecting is kind of the art side of it, right? Like these are sets that I love the design of. I love the rarity, what they mean in terms of the legacy of collecting for this sport that I love so much. And then we'll even start with something very unique, a collectible that I'll talk about in a moment that isn't even American sports related, but it kind of ties into my mindset, how I came to be in terms of collecting and growing up and that sort of thing.
Exactly. And I think to talk about your Genesis story is a perfect place to start with the first item. So without further ado, shall we have a chat about your first item?
For sure. So I do not have it in my hand. It's very large. It's in the living room right now.
I'll bring it up.
Okay, cool. The first item I have is the Halo Edition Original Xbox. So for those of you that are not aware of what this is, and you're probably wondering why am I talking about this, you'll hear in a second. So the original Xbox comes out in, I believe, the early 2000s. I was very, very young. And I vividly remember my dad going to pick this thing up. And it wasn't the Halo at the time, it was just their normal Xbox. And there's some funny things about it, because I always loved video games as a kid, because my dad, I was close with growing up, but he wasn't a sports guy. He's not a big athlete or anything. Like he was worked in computers. We connected over like pinball machines and video games, Star Wars, like very nerdy stuff to most people. But I still remember as a kid, like how awesome this was, getting like the first video game system we've ever had. And I was, again, maybe like 6 or something. And he came home with this thing, and like it was a big deal because it could play DVDs for the first time. And I know like back then people remember, but DVD players were crazy expensive. And now you had this thing you could play video games and watch Shrek on, right? So I remember watching Shrek. That was the first movie we got with it. And so the reason this is like, one of the collectibles that I have on my list is this is the only, I mean, I have like video games from recent years that I've, played in college and stuff. I don't play so much anymore, but I have a original Halo edition that is the only, I would say, video game collectible besides some games that I still have in my collection. So in around, I would say 2015, when I was in high school, there was this thing in America that, again, I'm not sure how common this is in London, especially in London, but maybe in the UK or, internationally. But a big thing around here is what we call garage sales or yard sales, right? So I live in Wisconsin. Um, a lot of people have all this junk stored in their attic or their garage, and they have these yard sales where they just set it out in their driveway and put prices on stuff on tables. You can go find deals and buy stuff. So we had always gone to these things growing up, garage sailing with my family. I don't know why. It's just something fun we would do, right? We go on a Saturday morning and see what we could find and that sort of thing. But in high school, basically I connected the dots on something that wasn't popular at the time, but it was going to these garage sales and hunting for stuff that you could buy and then sell on eBay. So it's a thing that, again, I think is very, very common now. Everyone knows about this, and you see YouTube channels that are dedicated to this. But, 10 years ago, I would say I was ahead of the curve, but I'd be lying because my grandparents and my parents had already been doing that since eBay started. I think in the late 90s, they had been selling on there. So what I'm getting at with all of this is around high school, again, I start going to these things, and, I have a job in the summer. I always had worked throughout high school and obviously with school and stuff, but then I connect the dots that I could, have a lot of fun doing this, but also make money. But the big thing for me that was super fun was putting a collection together of something that I had never thought of collecting, which was old retro video games. So at these garage sales, right? At the time, if I had been asking for sports cards, I can't even imagine what I would have found. But I would just always ask at every sale, like, do you have any like GameCubes, Nintendo, like any PlayStation, anything stored away that you would be open to selling? And then what I would always do, and it's kind of similar to what I do with cards in a way now, is right, like I would go find what I could at a good deal, and then keep the really rare stuff or the stuff that I really like that I remembered from being a kid and that sort of thing. So one of the things I found that year, that summer, before college, 2 years before college, was this original Halo Xbox, and it was a thing that I always knew existed. I had friends who I think had talked about it or something. I loved the video game. My dad and I would play this all the time. Legendary, the campaign. We just beat the campaign on Legendary and play all the time and online. It was like the first game you could play, at least that I ever had, that you could play online and talk to people. And you'll find this funny, but we had the voice chat thing, right? And my dad and uncle, I remember just screaming, like, couldn't believe, is like, there's a guy in here that sounds like Harry Potter. I think he's from England. He sounds like Harry Potter. Come listen. And then it's just like the coolest thing ever. But yeah, for me, the reason, again, why I have this on here is because, again, it's just a cool story of having found it at a yard sale for like $30. I don't have the box and all this stuff. I just have the system, but I still play it occasionally, and I'm excited. I have a daughter now, and I don't know if she'll ever be interested, but I think it'll be fun to go back and play some of these games with her, growing up and that sort of thing. And I always, it's funny, I'll have to maybe send you some pictures if you're interested of my old video game collection, but I had put together some crazy stuff in high school, just like with Sega Genesis was a system I had just so many games for, complete, very good condition. And then when I got to college, I sold all these things just because, you have to pay for college and that sort of thing. But this is the one that, held on to, and I still have, and I'm glad I kept something, because it just reminds me of that, just putting the work in and paying for college, doing this sort of silly thing, but it was very, I did very well doing it. I had a lot of fun, and yeah, I learned a lot of skills, I think, that apply now that we'll talk about, right? Just learning how to, sell stuff online and then find good deals. And then now that I'm more of a collector side of things for this sports cards, it's maybe some different skills that I learned throughout that time, but kind of connects everything. So.
Yeah, no, I was literally going to say that exact word about learning skills, because it's almost, Mr. Miyagi, like painting the fence and, or waxing the car in some ways, where you don't necessarily know what skills you're learning when you're doing something. And, I think acquiring that quite impressive video game collection, and then which you said you sold, but then you decided to keep this one item, which is, well, maybe some other ones as well, it's quite nice, because it's like that was a phase of your life that you obviously enjoyed very much, and now you've still got this. It's amazing. I don't think this was actually released in England for some reason, but I remember it was a big deal, and that some people had them. But I don't think it was released in England. And yeah, I mean, Halo, legendary game. It's interesting with that, because I suspect I'm a few years older than you. A few
27
years older.
Right now. How old are you?
Yeah, I'm 34.
Okay.
So I was in 7th grade when there was those, huge 3 consoles engaged in this gargantuan console war, all releasing around the same time. Of obviously the Xbox, the original Xbox, the Nintendo GameCube, and then my poison of choice, the PlayStation 2. So Halo was one of those things which I'd play when I went round someone's house, and was always quite interested by it because there was the sort of the component to it, which is what you say, which at the time I don't really remember being quite so common in games, like on those type of things. And it was always really fun playing together. And although I wasn't very good because I wasn't that well versed in the Xbox controller, I was obviously I was brought up on the Sony PlayStation. But yeah, an amazing time with those 3 legendary consoles coming out at that time. And I felt like you had to pick one as well.
Yeah.
You had to pick a team in that era. And I was PlayStation. I think it really was PlayStation because of Grand Theft Auto 3, and we all wanted to play I wanted to play Grand Theft Auto 3 and have it and do all manner of things that I won't say on this.
That's very funny.
But yeah, I think that was the thing. Grand Theft Auto 3 was just this amazing game. And yeah, I guess I chose the PS2 based on that because I was only allowed one for my 12th birthday. And yeah, but an amazing item. And like you say, taught you lots of skills. And then, I guess you then progressed into what you've settled upon in many ways. So should we have a chat about your next item?
For sure.
Which is a great card.
Very
so let's
shiny.
have a chat about it.
It's a 2002. It's called 2002 Topps Finest. Of course, it's backwards on the video, but you guys have a better visual. Gold Refractor, Peyton Manning. So I'll tell a story and then I'll talk about the card. So again, college, I go to school in Madison, Wisconsin, very big university here. Had a lot of fun, but again, sold out the video game collection, which is sad in a way because I don't think you could duplicate that again. I think that ship has kind of sailed in terms of people knowing that they're worth a lot of money, so you can never find those good of deals as a young kid. But then I get a job actually in Detroit, Michigan, which is obviously a large city here. And I moved out there during COVID because I graduated college in like 2020, right? So I moved out there right when that was happening. I had a job I really was enjoying, but I was living there all by myself, which got pretty lonely because I was used to having roommates. I don't think I ever had my own room until then, which is crazy to think about, right? And growing up with a brother, we had always shared rooms, except maybe at one house we had our own, but and then in college I always shared a room to save money, just as the cheapest thing. And then I get to Michigan, I have my own place, and then I'll never forget. So I never really, again, I mentioned about how connected my dad mostly through video games and toys and pinball machines, stuff like that, not so much sports. But when I get to Michigan there, I saw some video online about sports cards, and it's just like, again, I think I've mentioned this before, it's like a Gary V video or something, like a clip or something, like, look at this Giannis card, what it was worth then and what it's worth now, and blah, blah, blah. But I had all this free time because you couldn't do anything during COVID. I wasn't meeting anybody too much, really. I had some friends out there, but not really, like, you couldn't just go out to eat or go do something fun. Everything was closed. And then I connected the dots and was like, well, I did the video game stuff a few years ago. That was really, fun. And I learned a lot, and I put a collection together. I'm like, with this free time, maybe I could get into this a little bit. So fast forward a bit, right? I get into, collecting and that sort of thing. And then I would say, at first I got sucked into a lot of what a lot of us got sucked into that I've talked to is, like the basketball stuff, the Prizm, the new players that are, going to be worth all this amount of money in the future. And it never really made sense to me. I always was like, why was this player worth more than Shaquille O'Neal when Shaquille O'Neal did all these things already and this guy hasn't done anything, right? And I just kind of went along with it like a lot of people. And then at one point I settled on football cards. And when I got into football cards, American football, right away I was trying to figure out like what kind of, players would I want to collect, because I didn't mention this yet, but the way I got into American football was, again, being kind of a kid that was more into video games and that sort of thing. I would say around the age of like 10 or 12, maybe it'd be like 2009, 2010. Everyone in school was so into football. I remember Peyton Manning. Everyone would just talk about Peyton Manning. And I remember this kid that I did not get along with was like, do you even know what team he's on? And I'm like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea who this guy is. And I remember just being like so embarrassed, right? Because it's like, right, if you're in school and everyone knows who Lionel Messi is and you have no idea, you just have never because you don't watch it with your dad. You just have never been into sports so much. And so then the way I am, I get so addicted into things. I got all into American football. Like I watched everything. I learned all the history. I read all the books in the library about like top 100 players of all time. Who's Joe Montana? Who is Barry Sanders? Who are all these people? And so then, anyways, I get into collecting, right, and into the sports cards, and I kind of remember back to that time, like, who are the players I really liked right away when I was watching? Who were really popular? And, and you'll hear this theme throughout a lot of these. And the one that, again, came to mind is Peyton Manning, because I just mentioned that was the first player I ever, was really, researched into. And around that time, he was super good. But also, it was like a player where he, right, he won a championship in 2007, I believe. And then he had this, big gap before that, big gap after that. So it's kind of interesting the first time getting used to sports where you have a player that people are always asking, like, is he overrated? He never won again, but he's so good. He's winning MVPs. He's so good. So yeah, that's kind of my connection to Peyton Manning. And then when it comes to this card, in football cards, a big, in this era, the 2000s, there's multiple sets that you kind of see that are common, especially if you're on Instagram, right? There's Topps Chrome, Topps Finest, and then Bowman Chrome. These are like your three core products, right? Like today you have Optic, Prizm, Select, basically. I think probably similar for soccer as well. And so I really like Finest. That was just what I got drawn into. I love the designs of these cards. Like I said, connection to kind of more of the art of it. Like I love that this card, if again you're seeing the visual, I'm sure, it's very focused on the background and the player. And it's not so much like a field in the background with all these other players running around. Like it's just really focused on the design and the player. So I had the opportunity to add this card in early 2023. I think before that, there had only ever been one sale. And then after that, since I've never seen another one go up for sale. So it's been almost 2 years, and they're numbered out of 25. So of course, that doesn't mean there's not any other copies. But one cool thing about this card is, I have a copy, and then I know 4 others. There's 5 PSA 10s, which is crazy. If you know this set, it's very difficult to get a 10. There's 5 of them. And I know where every single one is. And it's 5 different Peyton Manning collectors, which is just kind of cool. You don't hear that too often. What I like about collecting him is the fact that a lot of people truly collect him. You don't see his stuff really super often, like cards like this ever get bought and then relisted, or bought and then sold a week later at auction. Like it's very common for these cards to just get bought and they're gone. And that's one thing I really like about the player. So yeah, this is just one I really love. It's mostly design focused. That's why I love this, and the legacy of, the gold refractor and that sort of thing.
And Austin, regarding Peyton Manning, whom is an American football player that I've heard of, why was he so what for you personally, but then also on a wider level, why is he so revered? Why is he so popular?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a few. Growing up, there's many quarterbacks that were popular, but there's 4 that come to mind in this era that were really, really, really good. That was Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and then Aaron Rodgers, but not quite at this point, right in the late 2000s, like I'm talking about. And then Drew Brees were the 4 that I remember most fondly as these guys are always lighting up the league. They're super good. But it was always Peyton Manning was the guy that was the most skilled. He wasn't winning all the championships Tom Brady was at that point, but he's always the most skilled. And also the other thing I think people really like about him is the fact that he's just such a great guy. I mean, I guess all these quarterbacks I would say are a great human being, but that's something I felt like people really liked about Peyton Manning is you felt like you could go get a beer with him at the bar. I mean, I wasn't thinking that at age 12, don't get me wrong. I'm talking about right now I would, I'd love to get a beer with him. You see him still very involved in the game, in the league. He does a lot of these documentaries you see on Netflix. If any have watched, there's one called Quarterback or Receiver that just recently came out. These are all produced by Peyton Manning, which is very cool. He's still very involved in this. But I would say the revered is just, again, he's just was always the most skilled. He's always putting up the crazy stats. Tom Brady may not have he had multiple seasons that were insane, right? But Peyton Manning always thought of as better, but he just couldn't win the Super Bowl. And now I wouldn't say Peyton Manning was better, had a better career, but at the time it felt like that.
Yeah, and it's amazing with Peyton Manning's story as well, in the sense that, like you say, he did manage to win 2 Super Bowls, but there was the big gap, and also he obviously I say obviously I read about this in the preparation before. There's no obviously about my American football knowledge, but he won the Super Bowl with Denver Broncos pretty much in the last season of his career when he was quite old, and he'd come back from this really quite serious neck injury, and he had spinal fusion surgery and everything. To come back like that is an amazing story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'll tie this right to the third card or third collectible if that's good with you. So this is the card that we'll tie to is the 2012 Prizm Gold Peyton Manning in a BGS 9.5. These are numbered out of 10. Yeah, so that's the other thing. I didn't get into that yet, but that I think is a big thing where I gained a ton of respect for him because like I mentioned, I started watching towards the end of the 2000s and early 2010s was when I really, really got into watching football. And doing, right, like we have our like fantasy football where you, of course, you put the team together, you draft a team with your friends and you compete for money and for fun. And so around that time, right, Peyton Manning, like you mentioned, he was playing with the Colts, gets hurt, he's out for an entire season. And you kind of around that time, a lot of quarterbacks or players in sports, you just think they're never going to be the same. It's going to be, the career is going to be over, right? You're out a whole year, you have a very serious injury. And then there's like the sweepstakes that off season afterwards, where I remember there's all these teams trying to get him to join them. I remember like Arizona being very involved, Denver Broncos. They ended up going to Denver. And what the crazy thing is, again, I think this is where I really, really enjoyed him and why I think I leaned in collecting him right away, is he joined the Broncos and put together better seasons than he ever had prior. Like he had a season that still is I think the best quarterback season ever. In 2013. So he had 5,477 yards, which even today we play one more game than we did then. They added a game to the schedule, and I think they're planning to add another one in the future. And no one's even coming close to these numbers. He had that many yards, and he had 55 touchdowns and only 10 interceptions. And like it's just unbelievable. It's like if I see videos joking around, it's like if you go in the backyard and play against your little cousins, that are running around, you just stiff arm them, throw the ball over their head, and that's what that was like. I mean, that season was just insane. Like every game he was throwing for 4 or 5 touchdowns every single game. And you just don't see that. Even today, a good game you would assume is like, 300 yards, 2 or 3 touchdowns. Like that's a very good game you see today from players if anyone's watching. But back then it was just, again, it was unheard of. So that's 2013. And then what's kind of interesting in his career is towards the end, right? If you were to look up his stats for 2015 when he wins the Super Bowl, the age was catching up to him. He was not throwing the ball well. He was making bad decisions, turning the ball over. And then an unbelievable thing is the Broncos benched him. So they benched him for, I believe it was Brock Osweiler. I could be butchering that, but it was a backup quarterback that then started. And then he gets hurt towards I think in the playoffs or, very early on in the middle of the playoffs. I'm trying to remember. And then Peyton Manning comes back in. And it's just insane because this guy is like, he's an old guy and now everyone just feels like he's washed. He's not good. And then he does just enough to win the Super Bowl. They had a very good defense and everything, of course, but then he was able to sail off into the sunset after that, which is just, again, it's just like an insane season because it's just, he wasn't playing well, but then he comes back in and is able to put it together and win the Super Bowl, which is just crazy.
And yeah, it's an amazing sort of comeback story. I mean, we've heard numerous comeback stories in sport, but this is another one that sounds incredible. And was that why? I mean, what I want to ask about this card in particular is it that this is the first NFL Prizm set, or is it that you wanted him in a Denver Broncos jersey, or what is it about this card which made you want it and also put it in your 8?
Yeah, this definitely is more of the set legacy, the fact that this is for Prizm the first year. This was always a card that frankly I never thought I could get. I had always known these exist, this first year of these Prizm Golds. I always thought they were so expensive. I'm like, why would, the ship has sailed, right? I said that earlier. The ship has sailed. These are really expensive. Everyone knows how these are. But what I didn't realize about Peyton Manning, and I won't talk like price a ton, but I think it's very pertinent here, is it's interesting because you look at other sports. You look at, like LeBron James or Kobe Bryant or Messi or Ronaldo for soccer, right? And you look at the prices of their first Prizm Gold. So for soccer, of course, your 2014 World Cup. like we were talking about before this, and you look at the price of what those things go for. I don't know what the top one ever, but I think Messi might have been like $500,000 or
Exactly.
something.
No, it was exactly
And
500K, I
then
think.
what's interesting is for football, like I mentioned, these 4 quarterbacks that to me were the era. They're all in 2012 Prizm. It's Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers are probably the top 4. I think most would say that. Tom Brady goes for nowadays like 100,000 something. It's just insane. The Peyton Manning has never went for more than like it's like 7 or 8,000. Like again, I'm not saying that to be cocky. Like I own this card. It's more of the fact of like a value proposition at that time. Because I had a collection that was very wide. I had a lot of players, a lot of different cards, a lot of like $20 stuff up to a couple hundred. And then I had the opportunity to add this card. And I just jumped on it because I knew I had done the research of what I just said with the pricing. I always felt like to be the second best player in the set, and you look at any other sport, the second best player is always very similar to the top guy, or he's not 10 times, 20 times less than the top guy. That doesn't make any sense to me. So that's where I convinced myself that, okay, maybe this isn't overpriced. Maybe this is actually something that's still reasonable. And if I ever want to own this card, this might be a time to get it. And I don't think any have ever sold since I got this one. I mean, I got this which is a cool story. At my first national convention here in Chicago last year. Wow, it feels like years ago, but yeah, it was just last year in July. I went to the show and I'm in on Instagram, like a group chat with other Peyton Manning collectors. Like I kind of mentioned some of them already. And there's a guy in there. His name's Kevin. He goes by to Captain37 on Instagram. And he was a dealer at the show. And he was set up before the show. And I was there already on Wednesday. The show runs like Wednesday to Sunday. And I don't go to a lot of big shows, but this is my first time going to this one. So I was very excited. And I got a message in the chat that he says, hey, somebody just walked up with this card. He wants this number. And it was like less than the last sale that I already mentioned. I had come around to that. This isn't that crazy. I had sold some cards. I'm like, if I found a cool card at the show, that would be great. There's no way it's going to be this one though. And then he says, he wants to sell it. This is his price. He's not negotiable. And then I was stupid because I thought about it for a second. I was like, that's a lot of money. It's worth more than my car, or at least pretty close to it. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? This is so dumb. Why would I do this? Because I never bought an expensive card. It was always like a couple $100s or something, right? And so then I call him back and he said, I'm like, I'll do it. Just, grab it. I'll take it. And then he said, dude, it's gone. It's sold already. Somebody grabbed it. Another dealer grabbed him. Like, you got to be kidding me. But I try not to be disappointing because I knew I had the whole show. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll find something else. It wasn't meant to be. I like to try to think that most of the time. Lately, I think I'm too impatient to think that. But last year, I was very go with the flow and it'll work out. God didn't want it this way, whatever, that sort of thing. And so I'm walking the show and I get a text from somebody that they saw a card I'd maybe be interested in. So I went to that table and then this card was just sitting above the card that I was texted about. Like the 2012 Prizm was just sitting there right above it. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. It's right here. And then I looked at the sticker price and what he had it priced at. It was only like, whatever it's the guy asked, or I don't even remember what it was, but the guy asked for a certain price. This dealer only stickered it up from that maybe 15% or 10%. Like I would have expected it to be like 50 grand or 20 grand, something crazy just to do it. But the dealer, we knew mutual people. So he was very kind to me. I think we kind of knew each other already a little bit. And so then the crazy thing is I brought cards to trade and I was able to trade like, 10 cards into this and then only give up like a third of the money I had brought. So it was awesome. Kind of a wild story, but it's just crazy. I think like cards like this, you have to get lucky like that in a way, because if this goes to auction, I'm never winning that. I don't know. I would never want, you know what I mean? It's just it's just so hard to bid against somebody on something like this. Yeah. Like I mentioned, I don't even know when the last sale is of these, but I think it's been two or 3 years at this point. So yeah.
And
it's
also,
a crazy card.
It's a very interesting point I think you make, Austin, regarding, it's because obviously we hear this word comp and stuff, and in a lot of people's mind, even though that comp would have been far undervalued, they would have had a very hard time paying more for something that has just been comped at a less price. And I think what one has to realize, which you've done obviously, and is literally like, you have your own things that you'll pay for, and it's completely fine. Like nowhere near the same amount, but there was a card for a very well-known player called Heung-min Son. I'm not sure if you're familiar with
Yep.
him. He plays for Tottenham. But yeah, and his first Tottenham year, Premier Gold, Topps Premier Gold, is that they're very hard, the numbered cards to find.
Is that 2017 or what year is he in?
2015, 16. And they're hard to find. And I missed out on one. And then I had the opportunity to buy it for 3 times the price. And I was just like, you know what? I know I want this card, because you know, you try and get clever in auctions sometimes, and then you start to, no, I'm going to get this for like less, and it's like, you know what? And actually, it was barely into the 3 figures, so it was nothing like this kind of thing. But I think it's a comps we should only use to help us, and if you know you want something anyway, and you've already done that, I mentioned it so many times, you've front loaded all the work. So what? So what? You know, it's just. But I feel a lot of people really hinder themselves because they get quite fixated on this comp sometimes. And
yeah, and I actually just like, I don't know if that's the right way to say, I despise them. I collect this era specifically because there is nothing. Like, I love the fact that I can do the research, and like that 2002 Finest I showed you, like I said, if you look at the sales of that card, there's maybe one. Like, that's literally has a photo. If you use Card Ladder, there's only one in the last 5 years that has a photo attached to it, because there's nothing beyond that. And I love the fact, like, there's, I don't want to say, like, the word isn't arbitrage, but there's some opportunity for you to do your own research and actually understand what these things are worth. Because then if you come across, I'm just going to use that card and make these numbers up as an example. But if you say you value that card at $1,500 and you see a copy out there for $5,000, even though there might be I think there's a comp for a 10 for 5,000, you might think, oh, great deal, but you don't value it that, because in 2000 whatever, that was a high price. It wasn't, a real price. But then if you see one less than that, you know right away what these things are worth, even though there's no comp to tell you that, you can grab it. And I just like that. I like that because the people that I interact with that collect this era, I never have the conversation of like, well, the last sale was this, what the heck?
Yeah.
It's like more of like, what's your offer? Okay, here's where I'd like to be. Or like what I was thinking. Then you kind of meet in the middle somewhere. It's very like just people who collect this stuff. There's not a lot of public sales on most of this, which I really like. It's a lot of just private people that we kind of have an idea of what we think they're worth. And I don't know, I just like that side of things, because I hate that interaction where it's, well, last sale was $4,000. I'm not selling it for less than that. It's like with no context. Or but I'm like, because then it's like, well, you won't match the other one that was, $100 for this other card. You would want $500 for that card. So that's not, like, this is just silly. But
no, exactly. And to be honest with you, it's probably a bit similar to you. I don't become, I mean, the thing is, I don't even become embroiled in those conversations, because if I get a message from someone on eBay about this kind of thing, I don't respond to them. And then sometimes they send you like the 3 question mark things, like about if I'm being rude, but it's like, I have nothing to say to you.
Yeah.
Like
I have the offer button open. Like, if you want to send an offer, and if it declines, then I'm not willing to go that low. Like, that's what's nice about eBay. I like selling on eBay. I sell a lot of more common stuff. It's like I do 2 things. I collect a lot of cards, and then I really enjoy what I used to with video games, where I find cards to grade, try to get good grades on them, sell them. Not stuff that I collect particularly, but I love eBay because, like you just said, you can list it. There needs to be no discussion. If you want it, you can buy it. If you don't, whatever. Or if you want to buy multiple, let's talk about it. But it's not, like you said, there's not this huge discussion about everything, which is kind of nice. It's a little more transactional in a way.
And and I'm not going to lie. Like, if someone annoys me, then I don't care. I would rather give someone something for a bit less, than if someone has annoyed me, and then I will dig my heels in, unfortunately.
My favorite thing I've found lately, I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, it's very funny. If you have stuff for sale and then people reach out to you, hey, I have the same card in a different grade. Do you want to buy it from me and then you can sell it? I'm selling cards in here. I don't want to buy your cards. Why are you messaging me?
It's funny. Like, it's quite, I almost don't want to say, I don't want to say things I don't really mean, but it's like, oh, would you want this card? It's like, no. And it's like, why not? And it's like, You've messaged me saying like, oh, it's a David Beckham card or something, or I'm getting rid of some David Beckham cards. It's like, but I don't want them. I don't want them. Like, just go and sell them go and sell them yourself.
Yeah, and it's different on Instagram versus like eBay, where I'm clearly trying to sell the same card. Why are you trying to sell me the same one I have?
Yeah.
I don't want it.
No, it's
Very
interesting,
funny.
and it's just kind of when people, or maybe I overreact or something in myself, but when I just get like, what's your lowest and stuff, it's just like,
Yeah.
just be polite, and then I may be more willing to work.
And that's the
with you.
general, like you just said, that's the theme I like about this very highly collected stuff, because anyone who, like, I don't know what the way to say this properly is, but anyone who interacts like that, they get shot. They get shunned. Like, I don't know how to explain. Like, it's just a very quickly people realize this person's very transactional. They're not, they're not polite in interactions. Like, I feel like you catch on to that as collectors versus, some of the new modern stuff. It's like, okay, I get why you're saying what's your lowest, because this stuff is just, there's so many copies and it's competitive. But the stuff you can't find, it's a little. I just enjoy that. I like that side of things a lot more.
Yeah, no, or sometimes as well. Now we're on a bit of pet peeves, which we're not.
Okay,
Going. It's like, say, like someone. It's not just myself, but someone will share something that they've gone to great effort to get.
Yes,
and then someone will be like, "Is it for sale?" And it's like, maybe one day, who knows? But and there is a side where there are some people that and I don't. People want to sell stuff. That's absolutely fine, by the way. But there is a side of some people that really like exalt over something and then the next week it's gone. That's a different element of things. But there are some people that like really share something and then someone will be like, "Is it for sale?" And it's like, let them enjoy this moment. It's but everyone's different, and that's fine, and that's what
the joy of it. I've turned into a grumpy old man, I think, the last few months. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting ecosystem. I think you need different people doing different things at all times for it to.
Oh, for sure.
It's symbiotic in a way, isn't it? But it's
and there's totally value provided by, like, I buy so many cards from people who find stuff at good deals, and then I pay them more, and I'm obviously love to do that if it's a card I'm looking for and that sort of thing. And I think there's definitely beneficial ways to go about all of this, like you said. Or even if there is a card somebody posts and is all excited about, and then someone messages and has the conversation instead of just saying how much, and it's like
no, exactly. Or it's like, look, I know you just acquired it and that's it, but if you ever want to move it or something like that, then it's maybe something that would you please let me know. I think there are ways to say these things.
I'm gonna let my dog in quick. He's like,
you let you.
There, now he's gonna go lay down. I could hear him whining and whining. I don't know if you guys could too.
That's fine. No, the good thing as well, actually, is that it will count. I couldn't hear anything, but it will sort of, when it's processed, it does all the noise reduction things of something. So it's quite interesting. But yeah, so we're actually gonna go back to 2002 Finest for the next item. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. And these are in acquisition order. I didn't give enough intelligence to say, like, let's go in order I want to talk about. But that's like, it's okay. That's fun because you bounce around a little bit.
Everyone can do their order the way they want to do.
So it's 2002 Finest, Randy Moss, Xfractor. And again, the video quality is terrible, but you can probably see it from the image. Or if you go on my Instagram, I think a lot of these I have a video if you scroll to the right of it.
I'll put it,
Yeah, so this card is awesome. The 2002 Finest, like I just mentioned, a year I really love. I like sets that are very limited in parallels. I'm sure for soccer collectors, it's probably similar. I know, like, 2017 Topps Chrome people like, and it is fairly simple. I think there's not a ton of parallels. There's quite a bit, but not a ton. But for 2002 Finest, this set's awesome. I think it's perfect. There's a gold out of 25. There's an Xfractor here out of 20. And then there's a refractor out of 250. There's nothing else. That's just
crazy
what there is, which I just love. So your two really sought after parallels have a combined 45 copies between them. Like, it's just, I think, a nice number because it's not like it's a one of one where it's impossible or like out of 5. It's feasible to find these, but they're not easy to find whatsoever. So the reason I love this card is the player, which we can talk more about, but the card itself, I just think the Xfractor design is just crazy. It's like an iconic parallel, especially in football. And it's really the first time they used it, and it was rare. They used it in 2001 Bowman Chrome, and I should say it was quite rare there too. I think there's like 150 copies. It's not numbered, but you can kind of do the math and figure that out. And then this is the next year they use it for the first time, and it's numbered out of 20. So it's just extremely, extremely, extremely hard to find. I got this copy from a friend that used to own so many from this set. So it's a funny story. It's like an example with my video games where he, before anyone knew about this set, before he knew it was popular, he just loved the design. He grabbed every player he could think of. He has videos where he has, like 100, like just crazy of like, here's a Randy Moss, here's a Emmitt Smith, here's a, all these very iconic players. And so he sold those off for, I think he probably did pretty well. He sold them for quite a bit, but he wanted to move in another direction. But at the time, probably pennies on the dollar for what they're worth now. So he actually still knew where some of them were. And he saw that I had acquired some of these, like my Peyton Manning. And then I actually got a gold Randy Moss, which is cool because it's a color match with the jersey. And then after that, he mentioned that he knew where an Xfractor was because it was one that he sold. The unfortunate part was the guy he sold it to graded it and got a 10, which is not unfortunate because I hate 10s, but unfortunate because I hate paying for 10s. Maybe you're similar. I don't know. Like a card like this, I would buy in a 7. I just don't care. I'd rather actually probably buy in a 7 or grade myself, of course. But yeah, so I added this one, and like I said, the card just awesome. The player itself. So Randy Moss, I didn't have the pleasure of watching a ton of because, like I mentioned, in like 2010-ish is when I really probably got into it, maybe a little before then. His career was pretty much over at that point. 2010, he had a year where he bounced between 3 teams, didn't, play a ton, didn't have a ton of yards. But up until 2010, so from like 1998, 2009, he had probably the flashiest and craziest and some of the best wide receiver seasons ever. For a player ever, like again, ever. A lot of people maybe know Jerry Rice. He caught balls from Joe Montana. Randy Moss had the opportunity of catching balls from a lot of people. And then at one point he got to pair up with Tom Brady, which was in 2007. I'm cheating and looking at Wikipedia, so don't forget the years. But that first year he went to New England, he was, again, very similar to Peyton Manning, where he had a year the year prior with 500 yards and he played 13 games. And the full season is 16 games. And a good season for a wide receiver is probably about 1,000 yards. And so he had 513 games with Oakland. I mean, it was kind of like, is it over? Is this guy's run done? And then the first year with Tom Brady, he ended up having almost 100 catches for 1,500 yards, which is just stellar by itself. But then he caught 23 touchdowns, which is like to this day is still the best. I can't imagine that ever being caught. I just don't see how that would be. But yeah, just insane season. Like the reason it ties kind of to myself is it's an example of a player that I didn't have the pleasure of watching, but as I'm young and learning about the history of the game and all this stuff, it's a player that I just keep seeing. And of course we have the luxury of YouTube, our generation. So I go back and watch the highlights. I can see him catching balls. And then, like my team is the Green Bay Packers here in Wisconsin. And he catches the ball and then pretends to moon the crowd, pretend he doesn't actually, he pretends to pull his pants down to the crowd and he gets fined a bunch of money. But he did that to Green Bay. And I was like, wow, if I were to watch that, I would have been so mad. Probably. I'm like, this guy's awesome. Nobody did that stuff back then. Now you see people a little more, flashy and that sort of thing. So yeah, you either love him or hate him, but he's one of the best of all times. And kind of a cool connection. And why I really wanted to collect him at the time was, he was in the same draft class as Peyton Manning, 1998. There's another player in that class that is very good and actually won the college, best college player award, the Heisman Trophy. His name is Charles Woodson. So I don't have a card of him represented here. I probably should have, but I collect quite a bit of Peyton Manning, Randy Moss, and Charles Woodson just because I like the trio. They were all in the same draft. They're all Hall of Famers. They all play for almost, like a crazy amount of years. And then Charles Woodson himself, again, I have to just give some credit to, he played for the Packers. So it's funny because he was on the Raiders, then he transferred teams. All three of these guys have a story where they transfer a team and then are crazy good. He moved to the Packers and then he won a Super Bowl with us. He won a Defensive Player of the Year, I think, or at least came in second place. So that's kind of how I got into Randy Moss, where it's just, I had that connection where I was in the same sets as Peyton Manning. I knew I loved the card for Peyton Manning. What other players could I get that have a connection to him? And that kind of led to Randy Moss there.
Yeah, and he sounds like he's got a lot of character as well. Yes. Like you say, sometimes obviously some sports people, because they can be so focused on actually being world class and elite, sometimes Well, it's in life, I guess. You get people with some more personality or character. Randy Moss sounds like one of those. And just to go back to this 2007 season, which is insane. I mean, I don't even really know much, but he's like touchdowns in 13 of his 16 games. That's just including 8 multi-touchdown games, 9 100-yard games. It's just, it just sounds like the most incredible season. And I think probably the saddest thing for that is that they lost out in the Super Bowl that year, and he didn't win a Super Bowl in his career. Does that hurt his legacy? And because obviously you hear this mentioned in the hobby a lot about titles and stuff like that. Is that something that comes up with Randy Moss, or what's your experience with that?
I think for football, it's a positional issue. I think for quarterbacks, it's a huge deal. Like if we're talking Peyton Manning and he wins 4 or 5 Super Bowls, you can probably actually start to compare him to Tom Brady, who wins 7, right? But he only wins 2, so that's kind of hurts the legacy in a way. Or some other players that I really like again, Aaron Rodgers, I've mentioned, Brett Favre. They win 1 Super Bowl for the Packers, my team, but they only win 1. It's always the what if, they could have won more. But then when you start talking about wide receivers and running backs, to me personally, it doesn't matter unless I were to have had like a great memory tied to that Super Bowl or whatever. But for me, I think in the sport, it doesn't fall on the skill position players, the Super Bowls. Like if you hear in the media, it is always the quarterbacks that get they haven't accomplished anything. They haven't done this. I think for the other positions, it's more about yards and more about, performance in the games, but not about winning, which is kind of interesting and maybe unique about football, because I think most other sports, I don't know, like, right, maybe it'd be like comparing a defender in soccer. If they don't win a championship, doesn't matter. Probably still matters a lot. But again, I don't know. In football, for me, I don't think it matters as much as probably a lot of people.
It's interesting, isn't it? And to be honest, I don't. It's not something I always like, because I always feel it's used in quite a negative way as a stick to beat certain people with. Like, oh, he hasn't won this, or she hasn't won that, or titles and things. But it's kind of like, if you're there and you've watched them, and I think a lot of the time, I said to you before we started, it's really just a proxy for prices. I think a lot of the time, when it's used in the context of the hobby, or this will hurt his prices long term or something.
Especially new players, I think, for sure.
Yeah, but no, I mean, Randy Moss sounds like he had that amazing season, but also from a story perspective, it's sad he didn't win the Super Bowl that year, just to kind of top off what was such an incredible season.
That is true, because even in the playoffs, and I didn't watch the playoffs that year, but I don't know how he actually played, but especially having an iconic game in the Super Bowl would have been nice. But again, I didn't watch it live, so I don't know how good of a Super Bowl he had. I'm just looking now. Yeah, even so for instance, the playoffs that year, and this is kind of sad. Again, it doesn't affect my legacy because I wasn't watching this, but in 3 games in the 2007 playoffs, he only caught 7 balls for 94 yards and 1 touchdown, which is crazy, right? Because he was averaging over 1 touchdown a game. He was averaging over almost 100 yards a game, and he averaged in the playoffs 30 yards a game. So those teams were clearly shutting him down somehow, which is very unfortunate. Yeah. But again, I don't know if that goes against him or is more against the quarterback there.
No, it's difficult, because I don't really know the tactics wise, but you can have, in big games, sometimes big players are shut down because the opposing team just have scouted, and they will do everything they can to stop that player operating who's having this amazing season, and then often the job is on the other players to do things.
Unless you're in the World Cup and your name is Mbappe or Messi.
Well, yeah, exactly. They were exceptions that year. But I mean, historically, Messi before 2022, this was levelled at Messi in the sense that in the at least internationally, not club wise, but internationally, it was levelled at him. Say 2014 World Cup final, he was quite quiet, but it's difficult when you're playing against a very good Germany team. They're no mugs, the German team of 2014. And
who were the good players? I remember there's a guy named Bastian Schweinsteiger.
Schweinsteiger,
Is that
yeah.
right?
I mean, the German defense that in that era was. I mean, you had Manuel Neuer
Oh
in
yeah,
goal.
yeah. I just know the names. I of course didn't watch these games, but I know the name.
Yeah, Philip Lahm,
Mm.
amazing player.
And he played for Man U as well, or Bayern.
Schweinsteiger played for Man United for a
Oh,
short
okay,
period of time.
yeah.
Not actually a very successful period at Manchester United. But he spent most of his career at Bayern,
Sure.
and then but so it's always interesting with these things. But Randy, I wished he'd won the Super Bowl that year just for that season. But
And if anyone wants to watch highlights, this is a guy I would, for like a wide receiver, he's probably the one you would want to watch because he's so flashy. Again, it's like an example of a player in a sport where he's just so flashy. He's not like, just quietly good. It's like if he's going off, he's going to flip you off and dunk on you. Like if you think of other sports, right? Like it's just cool. And nowadays, what's interesting is he's on a lot of like TV networks because he does some of the pregame stuff. He seems like a very relaxed guy, like very kind, very friendly guy. And recently he's been diagnosed with cancer, I think, or recently beat it or something. So there's kind of, and I think quietly had it and then maybe recently beat it. I didn't read the news a ton about it, but it's just interesting these players, how they do like after their career and like the person you think they are in the field. And he probably enjoyed in a way being the monster, like that people get mad at and everything. But then off the field, he doesn't seem like that way at all.
and also I think sometimes obviously they're trying to win, but I think some sports people really channel and are mindful that it's also an entertainment business, and there are some players that want to entertain. Like
are you not entertained? Like the gladiator, right?
well, yeah, it's like, say at the moment the Tottenham have a lot of feedback about them and the manager's sort of just, I want to entertain. Or a few weeks ago there was a very well-known Bulgarian striker called Dimitar Berbatov played for Manchester United on our version of Monday Night Football, even though it was the Americans, I think, was the original ones, and then we nicked it. But he was talking after the match about it was actually really, really insightful because yes, he wanted to win, but so much about what he did was to entertain fans with the way he played. And that was so in his mind that he wanted to entertain people and play this beautiful football and, the flicks and the ingenuity and things. And there are some that obviously are aware that people go and don't just want to watch boring football. They want to go and be entertained and have a good time, and then you have memories like this.
That's for Moss too. What's interesting is like for American football, again, if you look up greatest players of all time, Jerry Rice is one that you always see towards the top. He's the best receiver unquestionably ever, and he was so good. But again, he's not he was flashy, I should say, but he wasn't the cocky one, right? So it's kind of like they're the two where it's like Moss maybe was one of the most skilled ever and he had the best season ever, but then Rice has the best longevity, best career, pretty level-headed. I'm sure across sports that's so similar for two players where you got that kind of dichotomy a little bit.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and it's similar themes. I guess you can draw many themes on why some players are more popular than others. Like tennis, why are Federer and Nadal so loved, but Djokovic is not as popular despite having won more Grand Slams? There are so many different arguments for that, which we probably won't go into now. But moving on to Austin, to your next item. This is a player that I've actually heard of as well. I'd heard of and is quite a famous one. And also I think this is, as I was saying to you before we started, this is probably my favourite card just from the way it looks in the set. So should we have a chat about your next item?
Sure. So next card's the 2013 Select Gold, Joe Montana, PSA 9. So these are numbered out of 10. So we mentioned the 2012 Prizm Gold. That was the first year of Prizm. For football Select, the first year was 2013. Long story short, I've talked about this a ton on my channel and on Instagram, so I'm not going to go like super into it. But I was very heavy in 2023 collecting players, like early on. 2022, 21, 23. I was collecting players. I like collecting players. But I started hitting this wall where there was people around me that were just putting together collections with a budget that was probably higher than mine. that ended up where it's just like, I will never be the best collector of this player. And it's kind of a weird thing because in the way I am in my personal life, right? If I'm in school and, work or whatever, I'm trying to be the best on the team, trying to be the best, that's just how I've always been. I'm kind of addictive to that kind of thing. Not sports, though. I suck at sports, but I like watching sports. I'll try my best though. But then, so for collecting wise, and again, maybe this resonates with some people. I got to this point, like, what could I do that's unique that I really love that would be probably not replicable or no one's ever done before? And so something I settled on was doing this whole set, this 2013 Select. It's like my favorite design I came across in the Panini era. I just love how the back is like, it's the frame, the player, and then the back is just like a red curtain. Like, it's just very simple.
Yeah.
It's like I mentioned, art. It just looks like a piece of art to me in the player. And so I settled on this set. I'm not doing the rookies. I'm doing all cards, though, numbered 1 through 150. So there's the first 100 cards are all active players at that time. So in 2013, you have 3 players per team. So if you're talking, like my team, the Packers, there's Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback. There's Jordy Nelson, the best receiver we had at the time. And then there's Clay Matthews, who's the best defender we had at the time. So like each team has like 3 players. And then cards number 101 to 150 are all retired players. So that's where Joe Montana fits in. He is not playing in 2013. Obviously, he retires in, I think, 1994 and 1995. But this is the first time Panini decided we want to bring back some of these players in, a set. So they didn't have a Prizm in 2012 that had old players that were retired. But in 2013 Select, for some reason, they decided to bring back these old players, which is part of why I love the set, because it has these players that I never collected, like, Joe Montana or, all these different players that I never would have otherwise had a card for. And I decided that I want to go after this set. I can let you turn that off. Oh, sorry.
Don't worry. Okay, I'm going to let it ring.
My bad.
I know what it will be. It will be a neighbor delivering something, a delivery for a neighbor, because I'm not expecting anything.
No worries. I didn't know if it was really loud for you. That's why I said
No, don't worry. No.
So this card has an interesting story because I'm trying to do this set, right? And there's these certain players that I'm just like, gosh, how am I going to find one of these? Like a Joe Montana, that's just going to be very expensive, and I don't know how I'll ever find one. And so then last December, I had my first child, our daughter, and that night, this card was ending on like Golden Weekly or something. And I had kind of forgotten about it, but then we had the baby, everything went well, and we were sitting there, she's sleeping, my wife's sleeping, and I'm just like, why not? I'm just going to go on Golden right now. Like, all excited, obviously. And then I'm so tired. I'm going to fall asleep before this is over. And it has like the extended bidding where you can go back and forth. And I'm like, I'll just put a price in that's like the top that I'm willing to pay. If I lose it, I lose it. But if I win it, it's like kind of a cool story because, celebrate, get this card. And so I put the price in, I bid, and then I realized after the fact that there's a 20% buyer's premium. So the bid literally goes up to my absolute max. And then I get the invoice when I wake up in the morning. It's plus 20%. And I'm like, oh, this is pretty expensive. Why did I do this? But at the end of the day, it was fine, right? I mean, the difference was like a couple $100, but it's just a funny story I think I'll always remember because it goes to this set that I want to complete. I have 100 cards out of 150, something like that. So I'm getting actually very far along, but we're dreaming of building a new home. We live in a very small home right now that we rent. I'd love to get this displayed on my wall with this set, especially like you mentioned, you like the aesthetics. I just love the aesthetics of this set. I think it'd be so cool to get a display where like I could slap in a new card whenever I get one in, like a new one. It'd be so satisfying to put that in. I'm not sure how to do that, but this is just a dream of mine. It kind of, again, it ties with my daughter getting this card. And then in my head continually is, when we get this home, it'll be so cool to display this and all that. And that's been the balance with this, right? Like I mentioned, fairly young. I want to complete this set. The hard part with all of this is buying every card you come across versus waiting for a right copy that's the right grade, that's the right price. Like here getting a 9 versus a 10 was probably a big difference in cost, and I'd rather have the lower grade that just helps me complete my set and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
It is interesting, and it's very difficult when you have. Did you say this is numbered out of 10? Yeah, I'm having a look at the back. No.
Yeah, it's 10.
It would take a degree of nerve, one would imagine, to leave Obviously, if the price gets too much, it's almost preferable rather than you having to make a decision yourself on, oh, I'm going to leave this one because it's maybe a bit more expensive than I want. Because with a out of 10, it's just so difficult to decide to leave, especially when it's like one of your primary hobby goals is to do this.
Yep.
So yeah, it's and yeah. So did you have of those 100? So there are 150 that you're going after, and the rookies. So are the rookies separate then? Are they like 20 or something?
They're
or
like
what?
it's like 1 through 150. When I say that, I mean the card number, right? And then I think 50 or 150 through 151 through 251 or something. I may be completely off. I think those are all rookies. But the issue is there's to do that many, and I could be wrong here. I don't know off the top of my head, but there's just a lot of rookies, and there's only like 3 that anyone even knows who they are, or 4 or 5 maybe. Like Travis Kelce is one that I actually. And you maybe know that name from Taylor Swift. I don't know.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do know that name. I'm not a Swiftie, but I do know that name.
Yeah, I actually own that card. That was one of the earlier ones I got in the set. That was one of the more expensive. And then I sold it to get the last card that I'll talk about on this list, because I realized that if I wanted this, my goal is I want to display this because to represent, again, this era that I watched so much football. I just loved it. And it was, I enjoy going to games and I mentioned this, but like my dad liked football. We go to games together, but then when I really got into it, I think it was a good way to connect with him. And we went to a lot of Packer games and that sort of thing in this era. So if I want to display it, and that's the main goal, having 100 players that I literally don't care about, and I don't even know the names of 90 of them, I just didn't see a benefit at all versus this 1 through 150. I know every player very well. And that's kind of why I settled on that.
And sort of with you, I mean, you're doing very well with the progress. Is there? Have you? I mean, I don't want to say too much about who you have and who you don't, but have you got like some of the big ones as well?
This year was huge for that. There was a lot of names that I didn't know like how I would even get. Like they've just never sold ever. Like they're literally, if you search it, it's like it doesn't even exist. Like there's nothing. You can see the base copy or the silver, but there's no gold. Like it's just never sold. But I've acquired a lot of those this year that I didn't expect. I think I have maybe like a Jerry Rice. I mentioned that player. That's what I need. He played with Joe Montana, which is funny, and they're both retired, but they're both in this set, which is really cool. But I would say I maybe have like 5 or 6 left that are going to be very difficult it's expensive. There's a lot of people that collect this player, and it'll be which makes it very hard to find. But those are like, there's probably 5 or 6 players like that. And then 45 that are not super well-known players. I know them. People know who they are, but I don't see a lot of people that collect the players. So the difficulty there is just finding one. I mean, it's just like they don't pop up for sale. If they do, unfortunately, there's times where like a really just like basic player that was good for a couple of years, but nothing like crazy, they'll just go super high in price because it's a 10 or something and somebody wants to pay $300 for it. And I've just been actually passing on a lot of those, and it's actually worked out where then I find an ungraded copy for like 100 or something. I mean, it's just an example where if I'm trying to do this and, also say for a home and all this stuff, it doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, I understand that I'm selling stuff on eBay as well that are not part of my collection, and that funds a lot of this. But this year, later on this year, I've finally been like, it's okay to take some hobby funds and like save money over here because I'm pretty self-sustaining. Like what I spend is what I sell is what I spend, right? But I've never really taken money out of this. So I've started doing that a little bit more. But I'll still buy this set. It's just I'm not pursuing like really expensive cards for players. It's more of like doing these sets, and I'm really enjoying that.
Yeah. And yeah, Joe Montana is a name that's quite well known as well within American football. He was very good at sort of in big games, is what was said, at sort of this clutch kind of player, which is always. And is he heavily collected, Joe Montana? Then
extremely. But what's interesting about him, again, he plays in 1979 through 1994. I'm cheating again. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page. So he played for, is that 15 years? I was gonna say 25. It's 15 years. He's heavily collected, right? But he's in those years. So this is 2013, which is it's a weird card because it's way after he retires. So a lot of people that collect him, I know, only collect that era that he was in, or maybe like Flawless. Soccer Flawless is popular too, I think, right? Flawless.
Yeah.
So like he had some Flawless, I believe, like on card autograph with game used patches from back then. Like I think a lot of people collect that stuff. But this like later career after retirement stuff, I don't know how much these same people collect this stuff, because it's kind of a weird thing, right? If you go for this card, well, then Panini has made a bunch of other years of Prizm, and he's in some of them. You'd probably want to go for all of them. It's like, where do you stop? What's cool about this card is it's like the first gold he ever had. He never had it like really, he never was in like these 2000 era like gold refractors like I showed for the Peyton Manning. He never has any of those cards. So this is his first real like gold, Prizm gold refractor. Like, so it's a pretty neat card, I think, for that regard.
And actually, I think that's an interesting question as well, which I hadn't really thought about. And I think maybe I haven't seen so much on your Instagram necessarily, but sort of those career years, Joe Montana cards. Was there much? Because I mean, I don't know that much about, but I tend to see quite a lot of basketball cards from, say, the late 70s or the 1980s, baseball cards, obviously. But I don't tend to see as many American football cards. Is that fair, or is that just the way that I've seen?
I haven't thought much about that, but I agree with you. I haven't thought much about. I don't see a lot either, and I follow a lot of football pages, but maybe it's just because of who I follow. But now that you say that, I do obviously see so much baseball. I see so much basketball, but I'm not sure why. I'm really not sure why that is. Honestly, I don't know why that is, but I do know that like high grades and vintage for football are very, very, very expensive. But yeah, you don't see a lot of it. I'm not sure why, to be honest with you. I see a lot more like late 90s and then kind of this era that I'm showcasing today. That's kind of what I see most of.
Yeah. And actually, it's interesting to move on because Joe Montana had a very long career, and the next player actually didn't have quite so long a career. So should we have a chat about your next item? It's a very good sort of entry into your next item.
Yep. So this one is the 1999 Finest Gold Refractor Barry Sanders. This is the gems you can see on the side in the photo, I'm sure, too. So this, I'll talk about the card itself first. So I mentioned Finest. Again, there's Topps Chrome, Bowman Chrome, Finest. I like Finest the most. I think from just an aesthetic perspective and rarity, I think it's the most desirable for myself. Like, I just enjoy it the most. So what I like about this card is it is the first year for football that a card was ever distinguished as a gold refractor. There was golden cards before then, right? There was like mirror golds, they called it, like different cards that were gold, they were shiny, they were similar. Yeah. This is the first set that they ever called it truly a gold refractor. And for my collecting, as you can tell, that's a big deal. Like a lot of what I collect, I just love the golds. I design wise, art wise, I just think it looks the best. So when I talk about set collecting, I started doing the 2013 Select Gold, but then again, we talk about some of these players in the 90s that I enjoy learning. I didn't never watch, but I enjoy watching their highlights and I enjoyed learning about them. This was the set that I decided to collect as well that encompassed some of these other players that weren't in that set. So this card specifically for Barry Sanders, it's interesting because he retires in 1998 after playing like 9 years, I guess, if you did the math, or 10 years. He retired in 1998. This card is 1999, which is kind of interesting because I guess technically it's not a playing days card, right? He's not playing during this year. And for Michael Jordan, I think it's very similar where, I'm going to butcher this, right? But he retires in, I think, 96. And then he was still in the 97 cards. It doesn't hurt people's legacy, and how they desire the 97 cards. I think you see a lot of them, the precious metal gems, these things like that, very expensive. But the parallel is kind of interesting because I think they both retire somewhat abruptly. Maybe Jordan was a little more expected, but Barry was definitely left abruptly. He was at the peak of his career. He leaves, and then he's still in this set, which I'm happy about because I get to collect some cards of his that, I wouldn't have otherwise.
And Austin, it's interesting actually when you look at the description, because I don't know as for when it came out, but there's no mention of his retirement on the description of the back of the card. It's sort of really, he enters 1999 second on the NFL's all-time rushing list with 15,269 yards, needing 1,448 to pass Peyton for the top spot. Yep. So it obviously was probably, from the sounds of it, quite a shock that he decided to retire.
And that's true. And I wonder, I don't know enough about card releases to know this, but I actually wonder if, even though it says 99, maybe it comes out in 98. Maybe the set comes out in 98. I don't know how I'm trying to think. I don't know. I just don't know how that works. But to your point, it is interesting because, like you just said, they expected him to break that record. That was what everybody thought. If anyone's seen, a documentary about Barry Sanders or anything like that, that's what they always expected, that he would just play another year to break the record and then maybe retire or that sort of thing. What's unique about him and his career is, again, if you look at the numbers, and it says this on the back of the card, it's kind of funny. Barry has been the perfect 10 so far. 10 seasons, 10 years with more than 1,000 yards rushing, 10 Pro Bowl selections. So every single year he played, he was amazing. Every single year. And I just don't know of another player that was like that, like Randy Moss. I mean, Jerry Rice probably. There's definitely players that are like that. I shouldn't say that, but nothing to this point where he plays for 10 years and then he leaves at his peak just like poof, gone. Because for how good he was, again, even the year prior, right, it said he needed 1,458 yards to pass him. He had over 1,500 yards basically previous 5 years, so he likely would have beat the record. So it's very interesting, and this is just why I like the player and this era of cards, because like just so many unique stories about these players that I never would have known because I never watched, but you have to learn about them if you kind of collect them or start watching highlights and that sort of thing.
And why did, I mean, it's probably a difficult question to answer, and I think there's a documentary on it and it still doesn't really answer it necessarily, but why did Barry Sanders retire? What's your understanding? What was the reason for it?
Actually, so I'm skimming now too, because what I would say off of what I remember, and I don't know if this is accurate, but a big thing was he was still healthy. Another thing for him, and I don't remember if this from a documentary, I could be completely off here, but I think there was something along the lines of too, where he didn't feel right taking some of these records from these people for some reason. Like it wasn't a big deal. So
interesting.
It wasn't a big deal to him because he's what I like about him, and again, if anyone wants to get into collecting football, this guy's like the coolest guy ever. He was so humble, like unbelievably. He'd score a touchdown. You talk about Randy Moss, right? This is the opposite. He'd score a touchdown, hand the ball to the ref, and go back to the side every single time. He never celebrate, never do anything. He was so respectful and just calm. And that's interesting because his dad, I remember just from seeing and reading in videos, was a little more over the top of like, my son's so good, all this stuff. And then it's funny because his dad would always say, but Jim Brown is the best running back ever, which is a former player from like the, early days of the NFL. And he would never say his son was the best. He always say Jim Brown was. And it's interesting because I believe he could have passed Jim Brown, or maybe, again, I'm butchering this, but it's like he didn't want to break some of these records for these players that his dad loved so much, and I think he cared about so much. And I don't know if that's why he retired, but it was kind of interesting because a lot of people thought he should stay so he could break those records, but that just didn't mean anything to him.
It's so interesting, and it makes him way more unique that he didn't go on to break the records, because 99 out of 100, if they had the opportunity to do so, would keep going for a record. And I can think of some players, active players now, that I feel are still playing so they can break the all-time Premier League. Well, one in particular, who I don't think is very good anymore, but he's still playing. Well, no, actually, that's really unfair because maybe he still enjoys it. But I feel like a large part of it is because he wants to break the all-time Premier League appearance record. And it's amazing for him to have the discipline to, well, just say, I don't want to do it. Maybe he didn't want to do it anymore. I don't know. Maybe he just, because there's a lot of goes into obviously probably being an pro athlete.
Well, and the other thing with him too, and I should have mentioned this right away, but they were so bad. They were just never good. I think he went to the playoffs I don't know actually. I can't say off the top of my head how many times he went to the playoffs. Oh no, I lied. It did. So they did go to the playoffs 5 times, but they just never won anything. He was just never on teams that were champions, and there was multiple years where their record was just so bad. And I think that probably was part of it too. Again, people watching who know football probably know a lot more about this than I do. But yeah, it's kind of interesting.
And that's an interesting question then, because also in kind of looking at a lot of these players, they are quite anchored to, and I always think this actually in American sports, they're quite anchored to teams for a long period of time. Whereas in football, in soccer, if a player is in a team that's underperforming, they will put in a transfer request and be so unpleasant until they're transferred most of the time that they achieve their big move. But does that not happen quite so much in the
I
American
think more
sports?
recently it does a bit, but I don't think it's very well received in our sport. It's not very well received. I mean, there's players that left, like running backs that left teams this year that ended up on better teams and have done very well. Most of them handled it well, I think, in general. But the fan bases hate that. They just, I mean, it's just like almost just this thing that they want to stop this from happening. Um, Again, I think it is more common, but back then, I think we did that. He would have been shamed to all heck. Like he would have been like, it's just not something you do back then, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah, with the footballers that move teams,
Yeah.
it wasn't accepted by the
Yep.
fans
Yep.
here. That's what I would say. As in, there are many stories of players joining rivals and then being hated, but that's just part of sport. But it's a very, and actually, I'm going to watch this Bye Bye Barry documentary because I'm very interested into maybe some more insight into why he retired. And
Yeah, let me know what you find and what you think of it. I watched some of it, but it was like maybe a year or so ago, so I don't recall most of it. I just remember his dad being very involved in that sort of thing.
yeah, very interesting. And yeah, and we'll move on to another gold card. You like your gold?
Yes, yeah, I do. It's a good way to limit yourself. Yeah,
So should we have a chat about your next item?
sure. Yeah, so this is the 2006 finest gold Xfractor, Brett Favre, numbered out of 10, PSA 9. So I talk about finest again. This is another year of finest. One of the cool things about this era of like football is there's multiple years where they just come up with this amazing parallel. Like this year, it's this gold Xfractor design. They did it in 2005 and then 2006. So they only do it for 2 years. It's numbered out of 10. It just looks phenomenal. And they stop making it. I love that because nowadays, if a parallel is popular or a set's popular, kaboom, all this stuff. Oh, let's make it for 15 years. It's like,
Yeah.
I love the limit. I love the limiting. Like, I just need these 2 years and I'm done. I have both of them and that sort of thing. So this is a card where I had a lot of different players in this set. They're very, very hard to find, like very hard to find. I think one of these, this set period, like a Hall of Famer, I think one of these maybe pops up every like 4 months. And there's maybe like 30 Hall of Famers in there. So every 4 months, there's maybe only one Hall of Famer that pop up in this parallel. It's just like they don't exist for some reason. You just look it up. Like, I think if I look up this card, I mean, I'm actually going to because I'm curious, but I have to imagine there hasn't been a sale ever. If there has, it was like 10 years ago. It's just crazy when these numbered out of 10s in the 2000s, they just like don't exist. But this card, I was on Instagram and I knew someone, I think I knew someone who had it, or somebody told me that they knew someone who had this. And I kind of was, it was like, this would be so cool to own because it's Brett Favre. I'll talk about him in a second and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I can't even find a search on it. I'm just looking. There's nothing that has ever sold, which is just crazy to think about. Actually, maybe 2019 there was one. I think that was it. But it's an amazing card because it has the Green Bay Packers. It has Brett Favre, who is the first quarterback I ever really watched. And it has the color match, the gold with the gold jersey and the gold color. It just looks, I love the design. And I talk again about art. It's got framing. It got a very simple design. It's very focused on the player and then the parallel. Like, again, I just love this. I don't like all the, this may be a bad example, but like, I like Stadium Club Chrome for soccer because I think the player photos are just so great and they're generally simple. But the one thing I like with my cards is I actually like when you don't have a background, like it's just like a frame. Like I like that about this one. So a few things about Brett Favre that I really like. He's a very, very good player, obviously, for the Green Bay Packers. He played here for at least 15 years, maybe close to 20. Won one Super Bowl, which you tie back to the Super Bowl question. He was always one where you'd expect to have won so many more, but he only won one. He's a player that he's like the biggest boom or bust player you almost ever see in any sport ever. Like he was a guy who would just chuck the ball 60 yards into four players. Like it's just three defenders and a receiver. And then half the time it's intercepted and half the time the guy gets a crazy catch and we win the game. Like they call him like the gunslinger. Like was the nickname. Another thing that's really awesome about him when he played again is his longevity was just unbelievable. He still, I believe, has the record, or definitely had the record for a long time, of most games played in a row. Like it was like it was like 8 to 10 seasons. I'm just making this up. Something like, I mean, yeah, no, it is. I see from 1990. Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's insane, this record.
1993 to 2008. No, 2009. 1993 to
Yeah.
2009. He played every single game, every
That's
single year.
madness.
In a position where you're getting destroyed every game. Back then in the 90s especially, there was no protection for quarterbacks. You'd have somebody come behind and just destroy you, and he'd go flying, and he's just on the ground. So yeah, just a player like I've always thought was awesome. I love highlights of him. He's just crazy, crazy good. And this is like the perfect card for me because it's gold, it's numbered out of 10, and it's just so rare in a set that I already like. And so to be able to add that was just amazing. But he's had some stuff after his career. He's had legal troubles lately. He's embezzled money and stuff like that. Just not good things. But generally, he's been pretty liked by the fan base still. You know, if he comes to Green Bay or anything, obviously everyone loves Favre still. And I know recently also, similar to Moss, it's interesting these like legends become old. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's this year, right? So that's obviously, I don't know a ton about it. But I know a very degenerative disease. It's kind of sad in a way, but you know, likely from some of the hits and stuff like that. I'm sure that doesn't help. So, yeah, but this is definitely, like I said at the beginning, I think if I look at my 8 in my collection that I would actually take with me if I actually was leaving, it'd be boring to talk about because a lot of them are the same sets. But this is one that without a doubt would be right up there because it fits the fandom as a child of my team and the color. I mean, there's just not a better card for him that I would love. And it's interesting because like the 90s stuff for him, I mentioned people like the 90s. It's unbelievably expensive. Like you wouldn't even imagine. Like there's in 1998, there's a set called Fleer Brilliance, 24 karat gold. It's gold, very shiny, numbered out of 24. Those, I can't even recall off the top of my head, but I think it's tens of thousands of dollars for an out of 24. Whereas something like this, I was able to acquire for like you would not believe how much lower, like 10 times to more than that, 20 times lower than that. And I like that because it's, again, the way I've collected is very, I say like value proposition. Like I'm just trying to be very conscious of, okay, if I buy a card for 20,000, number one, I don't know how I'd do that. But number two, you lose so many opportunities to find stuff that I think looks better and means more to me. And I just have to put the time in to go find what that is. And I can buy for a fraction of that price. Like that's kind of the way I've enjoyed collecting, is finding those opportunities where I can put a collection together, but also, you know, I'm not spending my life savings on these things. That's the big thing.
Exactly. It's a form of Moneyball, which I think
that's a good way to say it.
We well, not everyone, but I try and do it. I think everyone does try. A lot of people, a lot of collectors try and do it because there's some stuff which you have in your mind that there's some items I have in my mind that, almost going back to the previous point, which is I've never seen sell. But I know how much I'd pay for them if they became available. You know, so it's these kind of things, and I think that Moneyball mentality allows for those opportunities if when they come to be like, you know, okay, well now this is it. This is, I want this item. I would like this item rather. I think I'm true. Like my mum always used to say, no, James, you don't want, you would like. So whenever I say want, I actually always kind of think, no, I would like this item. But yeah, so it's interesting. And like you say, this Fleer Brilliance, I'll look it up after when I go to edit. And they sound like amazing cards, definitely.
Oh yeah, they look great. I haven't seen one in hand, but they look, actually I have seen one in hand for Peyton Manning. They look insane. It's just it's like those sets where it's like everyone knows what they are. Everyone is excited about them. I just kind of stay away from it a bit, you know, in a way. I mean, I've shared some sets like the 2012 Prizm Gold. I mean, everyone knows what those are. But again, I explain why I pursued that card. It's because I felt like it's actually reasonable and the price didn't make sense to me in a way where my normal requirement of stuff that's very popular already, very expensive already, I'd be paying an arm and a leg for. I could kind of break that because I felt like this was a good opportunity to get that card. It wasn't like I felt like today was the day where, you know, the ship has sailed and I can't acquire it. I felt like that card still made sense.
No, and it's a really nice looking card. And also on your Instagram, you shared on a following page about the black Xfractor as well.
Yes,
which I think also looks really nice. That card.
I have a lot of players that have both. So the black Xfractor, they're out of 25. I mentioned Xfractor for football again. It's kind of interesting. This year they did Like they had a gold card, a green card, a blue card, a red card, like just very somewhat limited. But then they had a base card and then a Xfractor for each of them. So I like the gold Xfractors here and then the blacks because they're numbered out of 10 and out of 25. So they're the two rarest parallels besides the 1 of 1 Superfractors.
Yeah, really, really nice card and an interesting character.
And it's just
as well.
they're weird stuff because other sports, I don't think you ever see this. Like for sure for football or for sure for basketball, and I think baseball. It's just you don't see these. Like it's a football thing. The specific card. It's just I like that when it's very unique like that.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the. I don't really know how it looks in hand because it's the color match is amazing, and then the speckles on the photo and the scan, even some of the speckle, it just is a really great color match. Actually, it just. You've even got some greeniness to it as well.
Yeah.
So kind of, gold and green. It's just really, really nice. And so Austin, we're coming to the end.
Yes.
This is flying. And it would, it probably we weren't going to do an American football dominated Desert Island Slabs without having a card of the last
like the opposite
player.
for you. Not talking about David Beckham would be a shocker.
Yeah, no, I'm always gonna bring Beckham into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so should we have a chat about your final item, a set we've also seen earlier, but your final item?
Yes. So this is that 2013 Select Gold, and this is the Tom Brady. So this card, again, I mentioned that the way I did these in order was actually acquisition order. I added this card. Oh man, I don't even know now if it was July or August. I think it was August or September. Geez. I mean, it's very recent enough to where we were talking about doing this, and I was like,
Exactly.
I kind of want to wait till I get this card. And so this is by far the most expensive card I've ever bought. And I don't say that again as like a cockiness, but more of like a holy crap that took a lot of work to make happen kind of thing. So I mentioned about the set collecting versus like player collecting. I had so many nice Peyton Manning cards that, as an example, that were in my collection that didn't fit like a set. It was kind of like I was collecting Peyton Manning. I had like 20, 30, 40 cards of his.
Yeah.
But when I had an opportunity to get this card and it was someone to reach out to me, kind of wasn't in a rush, but he had a price in mind that we had, tentatively agreed to, and I needed to go sell a bunch of cards. I went and rated the coin purse of my player collections and sold a bunch of cards to make this one happen. And it was a really crazy learning experience. I have a little video about it on my channel, obviously, with this card. But there's a lot of like sending stuff to consignment, which I very rarely do. I usually just throw something on eBay, but and then letting go of cards that, again, like if it's in my collection, set aside, it's in my collection safe and all this stuff, it's so hard to sell. So when you have to sell something and you have to pick 20 cards and you have to sell 20% of your collection, you have to pick through what that is. And it was a good learning experience. So this card was, the cool part is, like I mentioned, the set I want to do, I have these players in my head that I know are in here that would be so hard to find. This was the one that I just could never understand how I would make it happen, because if this goes to auction, I don't know how I would front the money to buy something like this. You know what I mean? Like, right. I think people do it. But I would have had to have saved for months, and I wasn't planning to do that. So when it's different when it's a private deal, because I have time to sell things, and it worked out really well. Excuse me. But with this card, what I love about it, I mentioned again with that 2012 Prizm Tom Brady, how that one's just unobtainable unless I want to sell a kidney or two, probably, and my wife's kidneys too. This card was one where it's like that Peyton Manning, where it's like, to me, this, I think, way better looking the set than the 2012 Prizm is. And it's probably the, if you look at the Panini era, you have the 2012 Prizm Gold, and then probably the Select is, for most people, one of the next ones they would want if they could get anything. And it was like what that 2012 sells for, this one's like a tenth of that. And it's like, okay, maybe this is actually feasible and reasonable, and I'd probably enjoy it even more than that one that I'm never going to obtain anyway. So yeah, I had the chance to add it. I've got it. Tom Brady's crazy. I mean, he's the Michael Jordan. He's the Pele. He's the Lionel Messi. I mean, he's just the greatest of all time. We talked about Joe Montana. What Joe is really cool for, or cool Joe, what Joe is great for is he's 4-0 in Super Bowls. He's clutch in Super Bowls. He won 4. Brady wins 7, and he won one with 2 different teams like Peyton Manning did, which is actually, I don't think I put emphasis on that, but how unheard of that is for quarterbacks. I think there's only 3 that have ever won a Super Bowl with multiple franchises, which is kind of crazy to think about. But two of them are those two players right there. So yeah, just awesome. I mean, this is the card where definitely Desert Island is the first one I'm grabbing sheerly because of value wise and also how much work it took to get it. But yeah, I'm gonna take a drink quick.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's a great looking card. It's a great looking card, and yeah, obviously a player that I mean, well, to be honest, American football's getting quite popular here, but it's a player that has even sort of permeated a bit into the cultural consciousness of over here, and I think whether that partly is due to his relationship or former relationship with Giselle, maybe that kind of was a source of it. That's how to hook British people, is to go for like someone who's linked to someone really famous.
Posh Spice.
Yeah, Posh Spice, yeah, as well. Yeah, they're kind of like couple type thing. But that's interesting though, Austin. You mentioned about, because why is it that when a like elite franchise gets their quarterback, then they stick with their quarterback? Why is, because in Premier League or something, you have, or managers, you have numerous examples of different players winning titles with different clubs. It kind of happens. But why is it so rare in American football?
Yeah, I think part of it is if a quarterback's good enough to win a Super Bowl for a team, it's just so rare that they play long enough or the relationship gets bad enough with the current team for them to move on when their skill is still good enough to win. Like I mentioned, Brett Favre, he leaves the Packers in 2007. But we were really good that year too, and he left and was still very good. And he reasonably could have won a Super Bowl after he left the team because he was good enough and he had enough time. He was on other teams for 3 years, two of which he was still a very good player. But I think that situation is just so rare for them to be not only good enough to win with the current team, but also for the team to then lose the quarterback. And like for Favre, that happened just because he wanted to retire, then he didn't. We had Aaron Rodgers waiting in the wings to jump in and get going. Like for Brady, he leaves because, again, I think kind of similar. He wanted to, try something different, but also management, they weren't getting along super well, that sort of thing. And so he leaves and goes. And then like Peyton Manning again, too, he had the injury. Colts it was like it's time to move on. Then he miraculously was good enough. It's just so rare that the relationship, first of all, they're good enough to win, period. Then after that, the relationship with the team or situation doesn't work out and they need to leave. And then 3, still be good enough to win again after that time. It's just so rare. Like if you think about it, like Patrick Mahomes could go, he's a quarterback obviously right now. He's won 3 Super Bowls. 3. My knowledge is bad this morning. But he could leave the Chiefs today and for sure probably win a Super Bowl in his career with another team. But the missing part is his relationship with the team is so good. Why would they let him leave? That's kind of maybe what's different with, especially quarterback. It's just like, it's like the hardest position in any sport ever. And it's so hard to find someone that's that good. So it's just, they don't let them go when they get the chance. They just do not let these players leave.
And that's another very interesting, because again, this is a learning experience also. Why is it that, as to use your words, the hardest position in any sport? What's the reason for that?
I think people say that for a few things. I think the preparation, right? You have to have every play, know every play you're going to be running against the defense, know exactly what before the play even happens. You had to, all the plays you're doing. You have to know what every player is doing on that play, because you can't throw the ball to somebody who's not going the way you think they're going. And then you also have to know what the defense is doing before the play. And that changes, every play. So there's so many combinations. And then the active part, you snap the ball, you have like 7 or 8 decisions you can make. I think that's kind of why. Whereas like, to me, at least, just my limited watching soccer, it's a lot more about the flow, like, and like instantaneous, like going for something like instantaneous when it happens is kind of natural, the flow of it. Yeah. Football, it's so much strategy before the play occurs when nobody's moving. And I think that's maybe what's a little bit different, I would say.
Yeah. Because you kind of have to, maybe with a quarterback, you have to be a mathematician in some ways, and you have to know and a statistician, definitely, in terms of knowing what to play. And
plus, if you messed up, you have in your head that you're going to get your head ripped off if you don't throw the ball. Someone's going to take you down. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a very interesting kind of the American football I have watched is very interesting, the way it works with the plays and things like that. And yeah, I mean, well, congratulations on acquiring the Select Gold Tom
Thank
Brady.
you.
It took a lot of work.
It legitimized the chase for me because now I know I can actually finish the whole thing, and I'm not in a rush to do so. Because this was the one I was really worried about. If these cards became popular, this is the card that would be worth 100,000. I'm not saying it will be ever. I don't want it to be worth that because I want to still collect the set. But like, that was the card I was worried if I didn't get soon, and it takes off, I would never be able to acquire. I would never spend that kind of money. So it's like it legitimized the chase for me because now I know I have 50 players left, but probably 30 of those would not add up to what I paid for this, or 40 of those. So it's kind of nice part of it.
No, exactly. You've done the heaviest of lifting so far, and I think that's with. I've spoken it before. I think on a live with Favre. I think about deciding to go for a set is quite a big decision for me, and I have to, because there are some sets in my mind that I'd love to collect, but I have to get the most difficult with tickets. A lot of the time I have to get the most difficult ticket, and then I will do the set, because I'm not going to get caught trying to get a 1909 FA Cup final for Manchester United. It's just not, that's because that will really just hurt me to have that. So it'd be like, no, I need 1909, and then I'll consider doing the rest of it. But yeah, I mean, you know, that's a random example. But
I've even thought about, it's funny, but I've thought about with some of the other sets I'm doing, like the 2002 Finest, Tom Brady's in that. I don't know how I'll get his gold in Xfractor. It'll probably cost more than this 13 Select Gold just because of this set, even though it's less rare. But I've also thought about just doing a set. It's like Hall of Fame set minus Tom Brady, and just like be okay with that. I've thought about doing that. I probably will for some of these for sure.
Yeah, and also I think that you've kind of scratched the itch as well to an extent with an amazing Tom Brady card, which helps. It's not like, oh, I've speaking from my, because I can only speak from my own personal experience in this regard, but a lot of the time it's sort of like, if I've got this, then I feel sort of satiated to an extent. I've kind of got that card. I've got it. And I often do that as a test, actually, sometimes, or I have done in the past, when it's a good way of testing. Do I really want something a bit more expensive? Actually, if I can be satisfied with something that's just, you know, way less, then that works for me. But yeah, no, I think it's just, but an amazing looking card, and it's great that because as I said, I didn't know that you were going to say that, but it's necessarily, I kind of had an idea, but it is, and I'm not just saying it. I think these are the best looking cards. They're my favourite ones of the ones that you've presented. They look amazing, and I think like the really big player is quite like, as in literally the size of him on that, and then the gold border, and you've got the Select. I like the fact they've got the year on it as well. It frames it really nicely. It just looks.
It's very simple. I just like it compared to that 2012. And I didn't mention this even too, but again, you know, like for soccer, again, I'm sure it's there's those years like 2014 that just everyone talks about and whatever. But it's interesting because for football, the 2012, it's gold, but it's for Prizm, but it's very dull. Whereas this is very bright and shiny. And it's just, I don't know what the heck they got in the recipe in 2013 that they were missing in 2012. But I'm like, why didn't you just use the same color or chrome finish on both? But yeah, I don't know. We'll never know.
No, exactly. It's like, and actually, I think now, because the Select Gold is really bright, like you say, but even like now on some of the Prizms that I see now, they tend to be a bit more. Sometimes if you see photos of them, or if I don't have many gold Prizms, not expensive ones, just like random Premier League players that no one really cares about apart from me. But sometimes it's even quite hard. Yeah, sometimes it's even just quite difficult to sometimes distinguish them from the orange ones. Actually, sometimes.
Yeah. I'm partially, well, I guess I am colorblind, like clinically, but like it's not like where I can't see colors, but like stuff that's similar, I have a very hard time with, and I've noticed that with golds and oranges, especially on eBay. If the photo's not the best, I can't tell unless I see the numbering.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it's quite tricky. But yeah. What an amazing chat.
Thank you. Yeah, that's just fun. Good to finally meet too. I know we've chatted a bit online, so it's good to meet. Are you ever planning to go to a national in the U.S. sometime? I know maybe you were saying maybe not in the next couple of years with what's going on, but
No, exactly. Yeah, I would love to go to the
sure.
national. It's definitely something which I would love to do, and I've spoken about it with some sort of British hobby friends as well, like Favre, about mentioning going. I think it's difficult because next year, like I alluded to, I might be going away for a year.
Yeah.
The cost is quite prohibitive for us, obviously. So it would be like, I know, but then again, it's sort of like this is an experience thing. It's like a bucket list type thing to do the national.
But I'm sure you have like 2,000 or 3,000 pounds invested before you even leave. I mean, just with hotels and flights and everything, and that's the hard part.
Exactly, and I think that's the real challenge with attending the national, in the sense that I probably would be surprised if I never go to the national. I think. Because of how much I love the hobby, but then also it's tricky with the national as well, because obviously there is soccer, but it's kind of like a lot of it will be lost on me. So maybe
I did say they did a soccer expo the same weekend this year. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, they did. So I'd love to go to the national, whether it is allowable with definitely not next year with work, and also cost wise, like you say, £3,000 just before you've even started. So it would be going to go as an experience, not to acquire anything or even sell anything, probably. Or I'd try to take some stuff to sell, but yeah, I don't know. Any like unifying thoughts before we wrap up? Anything you want to talk about or say, or final thoughts?
I don't think so. I don't think it's anything too crazy. Just it's been fun. The Brady's been interesting because I bought that too, and then I've been like in hibernation. Like I haven't posted online very much. I haven't done YouTube as much. I'm just kind of like, once you acquire something like that and you work so hard for it, I'm like the grizzly bear in winter. I just want to go sleep for a while. Like I've just been chilling for a while. But I know it's funny. I've just been like this in the winter, where I know in the winter I'm just kind of more relaxed and like I don't need to be on. I'm just not on my phone as much. Just want to spend time with family. It's just kind of that theme around Christmas and that sort of thing. But I very much expect coming in the spring, I'll probably get obsessive again about the hobby. But at the moment, I'm just kind of chilling and enjoying my cards I have.
No, exactly. And that's the thing. I haven't really been posting too much recently. And as I was saying, I've changed the release schedule for Desert Island Slabs. So we'll see a burst of Desert Island Slabs, because it's the monthly I liked, but it was just always having to think about the month. Whereas it's the same amount of work, but it's not work, but it's the same amount of time, but that I'm going to spend on it, but it's just easier to sort of do it as a condensed thing rather than every month having to think about it. But I'm still deriving a great deal of enjoyment from my binder and stuff here in the flat. I've got like, just having a look, I open it up, have a look at my tickets, my cards in the binders and sleeves, and that's something which I will always do, but I haven't been as active.
I've got my Pokemon binder behind me. That's been my like fun lately. It's just like buying the $2, $5 cards that I had as kids. And we didn't talk about that, but that's been a fun thing to go back to. And that's where, like you said about the money, it doesn't really matter. I think a lot of the enjoyment goes to some of that stuff, even more so at different times in your life. Yeah,
no, exactly. But I think all that I want to say, Austin, is thank you so much for coming on and sharing some insights into your life and your background, and also some of your incredible collection.
Thank you. No, it was a pleasure. It's all mine. It was a lot of fun. I'm glad we could make it work.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much to the viewer or listener for watching or listening to this episode of Desert Island Slabs. Thanks. Austin was an incredible guest, and I hope you've enjoyed it. We've gone a bit off-piste with what we normally go. We've spoken a lot about American football and some characters, but have drawn parallels with themes that we have seen with sport and also the hobby. I've had an amazing time, and I hope you've enjoyed it half as much as I have. So it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from Austin.
Me.
Bye-bye.